The first participant is fuck golf.
You've got the best audience, buddy.
I don't know how it happened. Yeah, it's hard to argue. Just out of nowhere, I get the fuck golf account following, and they're right on the nose in terms of tapping into this live. So I've been blessed.
Yeah, I think.
Alterman, Greg Alterman. Oh my God, he's not just a random fuck golf account. He's a textile and apparel.
Oh yeah, Greg's awesome.
And also a Hancock Park icon. He was one of the foremost residents of Hancock Park for years.
Nice.
Yeah. How's everything going?
Good, man. Hanging. Good to be on here.
I love it.
I think all your followers, I'm pretty sure that Cisco Adler took credit for him. So whoever shows up tonight, gotta keep that going.
He's not happy with me right now, but Cisco, love you, buddy. Shout out to you, and you did get me past that 10K mark. So thank you very much. So Erik, we've been having a lot of great interactions, around a lot of topics, particularly since COVID started. We've known each other for a while, but certainly got more interaction over the last couple months. Hawke Media is a company that's been on my radar for about 7 years now. And I've been monitoring what you guys doing, and you guys really positioned yourself well for the takeoff in e-comm and branding in Southern California, post as Silicon Beach really started ramping up. And more or less, you knowing that there's so many companies that have a low threshold to entry in the e-comm and apparel and consumer product space, but still need significant digital marketing resources, you guys position yourself to allow to provide those to a wide variety of companies that may, if they were simply self-funding and trying to do this internally, would not have been able to access this level of resources.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really I built and sold 2 e-commerce companies and hated the sort of ecosystem and the landscape that are marketing agencies as well as hiring internal marketing. I just thought that there's so much snake oil and it's so tough to find people that actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I didn't start Hawke with any plan of starting a marketing agency, and I made fun of marketing majors in college. Like, that wasn't my chosen path. It was what I fell into, but it just came from a pain point. Something that I continue to try to solve and, have worked our way towards.
Yeah, for sure. Lawrence, I do not have a personal groomer, but we'll get to personal grooming topics later.
I think it's just a juxtaposition here.
More or less. Okay, so tell us, I give a little, but in terms of what service Hawke provides, the types of companies that you guys work with, and where in the marketplace you're positioned.
Yeah, so basically the idea of Hawke is we're an outsourced CMO and marketing team to companies. So we go into brands of all sizes, from tiny startups through Fortune 100s, do a full audit for free on what they're doing in marketing, and then spin up a team all a la carte and all month to month. The idea being we can pick exactly what their needs are, work with it, and then be very nimble as the company's needs change, et cetera. But currently we have about 150 employees, manage marketing for around 500 companies.
Very cool. Any industry?
And I do love Squid Bro. That's fair, Joey.
Who doesn't? No, listen, everyone, I can assure you that 9 out of 10 guests on BNN will absolutely love Squid Row. That's a
great place.
Guarantee everybody. Of those 500 companies, can you give us, is there any particular industry concentration or any breakdown you can give us there?
I mean, it's probably 70% e-commerce. So thankfully in this situation, we're very heavy in e-commerce. A lot of SaaS, we've some brick and mortar, some restaurants, some gyms, car wash chains, things like that. I mean, the whole idea, like, our mission statement is accessibility to great marketing for everyone. Like, this was sincerely started because I thought it was ridiculous how hard it was to find decent marketing for a company if you're not Nike. So, so, now that's been what we continue to do. And so it's really wide because we really try not to put a gate up on companies getting access to us.
Very cool. Okay, so bringing us to, our current circumstances, and I don't think I'm being particularly groundbreaking in making the observation that there's been a massive acceleration in the e-commerce space and a shift in consumer behavior from, when there's no brick and mortar available, obviously it doesn't take a rocket scientist to note the shift to online. But instead of just talking about it in kind of an instinctual, common sense way, what's been happening? What are the macro observations that you've made and that you've seen over the course of the past 6 weeks?
Yeah, and you've shared some of the stats on Instagram. We saw this coming, thankfully. So we really, I spent the first month of this convincing people not to be proactive in what was going on, meaning like cut themselves off, cut their marketing because they thought something was coming. And we saw not only record months pretty much across the board, but like 2x, 3x what they expected. So like massive, massive, massive growth months. And it's pretty simple where that comes from. So last year, online spending, online consumer behavior was about 13 to 15% of the entire consumer spending. 13 or 15% were online, 85 to 87% in brick and mortar. And over the past 6 weeks, that went to 30% online. So over doubled in the past 6 weeks. So if you grabbed some of that share as it was doubling the market share, you did very well. And what we saw was, that's our job, is to be positioned that way. So yes, we like to believe that we're at least above average. And so if you're above average in this situation, you grew significantly. And so what we've seen is, and we talked about this a little earlier, consumer spending isn't down very much. And where it's down is the obvious ones: travel, hospitality, frankly, brick and mortar. But, we have friends that own restaurants that are doing just fine, if not crushing it right now, which is still surprising. But the discretionary spending isn't down. You have to think about, like, most of the people that are in this unemployment figure are people that are, and I'm saying most, I don't have the actual stats, but I'm guaranteeing most are somewhere close to that minimum wage line. And now our unemployment pays higher than it's ever paid before. And traditional kind of rule of thumb is the lower middle class spend 110% of their income. So all of a sudden they have this influx, the $1,200 stimulus, $600 extra a week in unemployment, and you're going to see that getting spent. And that is what we're seeing. And so for now, consumer spending hasn't gone away because most white collar employees still have their jobs, and the blue collar and minimum wage employees are getting subsidized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, and I'm sure there's some psychological components to that as well, in terms of, with regardless, that I think people, well, first of all, a couple of fixed costs have been deferred, right? So the truth of the matter is, you've got some people who are maybe netting out at a higher gross monthly income, not having to pay rent than they were before. This might be the most responsible personal finance decision because they're going to have to pay this rent eventually, but they don't have to pay it right now. This level of unemployment, they have a little bit of savings, they've got a lot of free time to spend at home, dwelling on God knows what. And that's, leading to some maybe semi-impulse buy decisions. But so obviously, okay, e-commerce spend has increased. It's overall, and it may be even more significant than we think because there's been such an overall drop. There has been an overall drop in consumer spending due to automotive, travel, leisure, and some other stuff that's just not being paid. So, okay, so what, I'm sure if we're looking at which industries have really thrived and which have done very well within this framework, we're going to see some that are very obvious and expected, and some that we didn't see coming. So maybe you can tell us about both categories that you've seen.
And now I think it's a little normalized. We're actually seeing, like, in terms of like this radical behavior start to calm down. And it was just mentioned in the chat, by Cole Zucker, great guy. What I think the next thing that's coming is July 1st, the PPP stipulations end, this unemployment boost ends. And if we know anything about government, they're going to wait and play chicken until they do something else, which means maybe July 15th or August 1st. So that period is going to be really tough. But from now until then, I think we're actually in an okay place, assuming no huge piece of news comes out about this thing. And 2 weeks after trying to open, it surges. I don't see that coming, but I'm not an epidemiologist.
We all are these days. Don't sell yourself.
Right. Yeah. No, and I actually have I've saved on my phone a badge. It's like Facebook certified epidemiologist or something. I love that thing. I've been posting it on all my friends. But the surprises early on, in mid-March, we were definitely glued to the stats, and our team, I had them pulling a report every week of just the overall trends and stats that every other company was pulling together. So we've been posting on our blog every week. We publish it on Wednesdays. And what we saw was really weird. In early April, we had two women's swimwear companies have record months, or just knock it out of the park. We had a jewelry company do triple what they expected to do. So we're not seeing surges in just Lysol and toilet paper. Retail therapy is a real thing. And again, people's income is not necessarily down as a whole. And I heard it, and this is anecdotal, but I heard a stat that people have more in their savings account than they have in 30 years. So people, that burns a hole in people's pockets. They start spending it and realize there's a big portion of their money that was spent on travel and leisure and all these other things that they're not right now. Yeah. And so instead they're like, I'll just buy that thing. Like we do all the marketing for a few major bicycle companies that are all completely sold out of product bicycles because people are stuck at home and like, I need to go for a bike ride. So they have sold out and I'm one of them. I bought a bike from them. So there's a lot of those kind of surprises that, again, in hindsight start to make sense. But no, I did not expect our bicycle clients to sell out in April at the beginning of April. Yeah, that's well, man. There's just so many completely counterintuitive dynamics that we're seeing right now. And one is even, from initially, you're anyone who's sensible. Right off the bat, when an episode of this significance occurs, you're going to be concerned. You're going to be concerned about how people are going to react to your business, about the bottom falling out. And it turns out that once you're able to take a step back, that initial, terror that you felt at what might lay ahead for your business, I mean, a lot of this makes sense. Well, and I think it's important. A couple of things are important. One is you have to know that people in LA and New York are a lot more nervous about this than the rest of the country. My business partner lives in Idaho, have friends all over the country. LA and New York have reacted heavily to this compared to the rest. So what we see is definitely a bubble in terms of the fear around it. Yeah. Hence, like we'll get into it, but the LA Times headline that got changed yesterday, that and what that caused. So those are things that are unique to us. And I assume a lot of your audience are business owners. Business owners are navigating this very differently than employees of companies. Because again, there's a pretty big safety net right now. And I think there was some initial fear and initial layoffs, and then people are stuck at home and want to make the best of it. It's just human nature. I have one question there. Do you think that's a matter of time, like that's the function of time and free time spent? Because if you're an employee and you can't go to work and you're ordered to stay home, you don't have much to do. You have to go pursue your personal interests, God knows what, and have free time on your hands. If you're a business owner and whose business is shut down and your employees are told to stay home, you still have to do a ton of crisis management. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so you're thinking about the fear. So like B2B business slowed down in April significantly. And then what I'm hearing across the board is May, people are already opening up like, oh shit, now we have to get on top of this. So we're seeing it ourselves. We're seeing it across like people that we're running out of fear in April are like, well, I got to do something now. I can't just hold on for dear life. But I think on the consumer side, I think it lasted a couple of weeks. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, consumer spending's down a little bit. There's some fear out there. And there's some rightful fear out there. There's a whole other side to this. I'm speaking to the economics, but the actual disease is a scary thing. Sure. But the economic side, I think once you come to terms with this is what I'm doing for the time being, then you just make the best of it. And that's why you see bicycles selling out. And the other side of this too is all the big CPG, the large private equity backed companies, the publicly traded companies, the big guys, all pulled out of marketing heavily when this all hit. And so the cost of advertising on Facebook and Google over the past 2 years has increased like 2.5x, and it dropped 30% in a few days. Yeah. And so you've got 30% people viewing 30% more content online and a 30% cheaper cost to advertise. And again, contributed or also combined with the fact that it's doubled, the market base has doubled, and you have this massive opportunity online. We got a report from Klaviyo, the email software today, that the average revenue per email sent on their platform, and they're the biggest Shopify partner for email, average revenue per email sent has doubled in the past month. And it's been consistent for 2 years, by the way. It's like they showed 2019-20, it's kind of a little jagged line, and then just skyrocketed in April. And that amount of time is just beyond belief. Since this is a really good point, I think really interesting for people, and just for people who might not be as familiar with this space, the point that Erik just made. Okay, so obviously online ad rates, Facebook ad rates, AdSense, DoubleClick, whatnot. The prices are somewhat dependent on the prices rise as more people join the space and more people are bidding for the advertising. So the last handful of years, larger companies have been directing more of their marketing budgets towards online spend and towards these platforms, thereby raising those rates. Okay. Yep. At the very beginning of the lockdown, what happened was those companies, because big companies that make macro decisions that, because this is stuff their number one priority is looking good to the shareholders, they have to flip switches that when you flip that switch, it's a big switch. So they turn off a lot of their marketing budgets and they remove all that ad spend
from these marketplaces, and not just tank the ad rate. So a lot of the companies that are not multinational publicly traded companies, but still play in this space that's only one lane and one channel for some of the multinationals. They benefited from that because they get lower ad rates, and so that was a pretty aggressive trend initially, and now that some of the immediate impact is worn off a little bit. And yes, Craig Clemens makes a great point. And Erik actually made this point when we spoke earlier today, was that it's going to take a while for these companies to flip that switch again.
It's super important to realize that.
Yeah,
they turn it off overnight, but they're not going to ramp it back up for a while.
Exactly. So we're going to see we're seeing it slowly tip back up. Okay, so in terms of businesses that have really benefited during this period, that we're going to have to watch to see the stickiness of this going forward. Essentially anything that enhances the being at home experience has benefited. So that could be something as simple as homewares and the types of things that were sold previously at Home Depot, or furniture enhancements or whatnot, or something that's a little more out of the box, like lingerie, for instance, which was an interesting point that you made earlier.
Lingerie, houseplants have crushed it.
Wow.
Very simple one. I mean, and again, people there was a lot of assumptions. I heard about them the first couple of weeks of this, that everyone was going to go to the necessities. They were only going to buy what they needed, and everyone's going to hold on tight to their money. And it's just not what people do. We're in a consumer society, and people were still making money. And again, the majority of the country, there's a huge minority, but the majority of the country was not worried about their jobs in this. And now they're really not worried. The big layoffs have kind of it's slowing down. It's slowing down. We're seeing the layoffs really, and don't get me wrong, something else might come. I'm just talking about facts now. One thing I've been hypercritical of with the people around me is speaking factual and with certainty about the future right now is just a fallacy. Who knows?
Sure.
And I think it's the biggest trigger for me is when I see someone state a fact about the future, or even about COVID right now. I got an email forwarded to me from I won't call it the college, but a professor at a college in epidemiology saying COVID has a 44% asymptomatic rate. 44% of people are asymptomatic. Fact. We don't even know how many people have had this yet. So to state something like that is immediately false. And these are the kind of things you got to be careful of. Whenever you see someone stating facts about this stuff right now, run.
Yeah. It's, man, God will have a way of making you look very foolish right now. Something I posted earlier today, and obviously your instinct with some of the states that are opening up early that seem to be doing things a little haphazardly and cavalierly is, oh my God, it's inevitable. You're going to get a spike in infections, and there's going to be an increase in deaths a couple weeks in. A pretty prominent online journalist named Ron Fournier said, mark my words, 2-3 weeks from now, you're going to see there's going to be a massive increase in deaths in Georgia as Georgia opened up early, and the governor's going to have blood on his hands. Every piece of data thus far, 2.5 weeks into the end of lockdown, which now has some legitimacy because there's been some horizon to build that up, seems to suggest that Georgia's faring fairly well, and is even seeing a drop in infections and deaths. So, guys,
and most of Europe and most of Asia,
exactly.
And I'm cautiously optimistic, but you got to look at the rest of the world. And again, absolutely. I think that Californians and New Yorkers have a reason to. Californians kind of do, but we're very scared of this thing compared to the rest of the world. Don't get me wrong, it's a bad thing. It affected everybody, but we're I saw DC's pushing back till sometime in June now, actually pushing back, not LA pushing back. So it's there's still caution out there, but there's also, I don't think that to judge the states that are opening up, I think you have to be careful with that too, because to make statements oh, they're screwed, it's well, let's see, but potentially not. Idaho's been open for a while. They're fine.
Yeah. Speaking in conclusory tones, people seem to think that I do sometimes just because I speak very straightforward. But sometimes you can speak straightforward and yet hedge your bets and know that you're not. If you try to make conclusory statements in this environment, you're just asking for it. People are just asking for it. Okay, so in terms of, another interesting aspect both of your business internally and also that's very relevant to your business because it's how many of your clients stay afloat, is the early stage investing world and startup investing, seed investing, Series A, whatnot. Speaking with some angels, speaking with some VC guys recently, there's definitely a lot of concern. And listen, that world was operating on some wonky principles the last 5 to 7 years, right? And I think a lot of companies that were taking, as Scott Galloway talking about, Casper mattresses taking $1 and turning it into 75 cents, right?
Yep.
And companies that were juicing sales and growth, but operating at significant deficits. We started to see the early inklings of that kind of go out of style with the implosion of WeWork last year, some of the, the less than stellar public market performance of Casper, Smile Direct, but it was not this tidal wave. It was not this, it wasn't a market blow up that, oh my God, it was a bubble and it popped. No, it seemed to be a slow trickle, and it seemed like the market was going to rationalize. So, in terms of both you guys as angel and seed stage investors, and both from what also what you're seeing in terms of the funding environment for your clients, because hey, some of the way you get paid is investors investing in companies, and some of that money goes to Hawke Media. So what are you seeing in that environment right now? Yeah.
Thankfully, we're so focused on unit economics and profitability in the work we do. Most of our clients are that way too. So we very rarely get the companies that are just buying market share. That's not really a big part of our business. So and burning cash in that way. We get funded companies, but usually they have a pretty clear path to profitability. So what we're seeing is, listen, I think there's a broader kind of just principle here that we found, which is everyone's affected in some way. Everyone lost customers or investors or something. Like, you're going to lose, if you're going wide enough, there are going to be people in your target that are going to move on and not be a part of this, whether it's a customer, an investor, someone is going to get gun shy or actually be affected. And so, but I've seen a couple of, so we have our venture fund, a couple of our portfolio companies have closed rounds in the past month. We've invested in 2 companies in April. We invested in April, 2 different companies. The valuations didn't change, because the nice thing about venture is there's a lot, it's a partnership. They're not buying you. You can't really be as predatory in venture, because you still have to bet on the jockey. And so the smart venture capitalists are still watching if it's reasonable. Hopefully you did your due diligence up front and you're not investing flippantly anyways, which you kind of mentioned some of these companies. I personally never invest in the idea of let's just burn hundreds of millions of dollars and hope someone buys it for $1 billion. I think that, the chances of success there are low. It happens, but that's not really the game I play when it comes to investing. And the people that do are going to get hit in this kind of environment, but hopefully they made enough money in the other wins. Love Mike Dubin. I worked at Science, but Dollar Shave Club never turned a profit and sold for $1 billion. To me, that's crazy, but good for them. I don't know, in a down market, those deals are harder to pull off. So if you're just and that's where I see, you see some pretty big layoffs happening at all of the SoftBank portfolio companies. And it's because they were all banking on a next round in 6 to 12 months, and they were just burning cash that they can't burn anymore. And that's when you hear the things about preserving capital and the runway and all that, it's from those companies that are in hyper burn mode that have to pull back. If you were getting towards unit economics, or you have those in some way, then you should be in a better place.
And in terms of, have you seen companies adjusting you may not, because they might be ramping up their ad spend, right? How are you seeing companies, venture-backed, earlier stage companies, addressing their burn rate in this environment?
I've seen, if it depends on who's backing them. A lot of VCs immediately told everyone to pull back and to cut. So I don't agree. That's not what we told our portfolio to do. And we have 2 e-commerce companies in our portfolio that both saw over 100% growth in April. So, and one that saw 40,000% growth, because it was, I can't share who, but they crushed it. So I don't believe in pulling back in an environment like this, because again, it comes down to fundamentals. You need your revenue, assuming you're running on that. If you're running on funding and you don't need to worry about revenue, then sure, there's a different strategy here. If you're a SaaS business, it doesn't need to acquire new customers, sure. But consumer brand or an e-commerce company, your marketing is generally your lifeblood in any environment. You have to run marketing to get, or someone else will take your market share. That's how this works. And so right now, there were definitely companies that cut marketing. We lost 15% of our customers in terms of pause, hold off, let's not do anything for a while, et cetera. But they were replaced in a lot of ways with other people that were we got to figure this out. Sorry, we delayed. So we were able to make do. But a lot of people acted out of fear. A lot of VCs acted out of fear. And again, if you're staring at a runway, you're looking at how to maximize that. For me, I know that I'm going to lose customers. So like Hawke Media, for example, we pulled back on no marketing. We didn't pull back on sales, and we went for it. And in April, we had a slow month. It just is going to happen. But we also built a backlog, and marketing's cheaper than it's been. So we're getting a cost per lead that is by like a third of what it used to be.
Wow.
And, yeah. And so that might not close right now, because that's, the reality here is you're going to lose customers, again, going back to that. But you're also going to be able to get new customers for cheaper. There just might be a longer purchase cycle because people are choosing more wisely what they're doing. So assuming your conversion rate doesn't drop to a third, but your cost per lead does, you're probably in a good spot. And our conversion rate has not dropped to a third of what it was. So that's what I see with a lot, like the right move right now. And that's what we were preaching 2 months ago. And again, thankfully, a lot of people listened. And so it went well. But I did see kind of top down. That's why I was speaking to like the larger companies. And then what happens is the big private equity companies say it. A lot of the big VCs say it. Then other VCs start sharing that note. I forgot who did it. Was it Kleiner Perkins or Sequoia put out like a, they put something out in 2008 about the music stopping. And then they did it again when COVID hit. And they're like, everyone should be cutting back. You need to extend your runway and da-da-da. And like, by the way, there absolutely is truth to that. But you always have to, you can't take generalized advice to the entire economy. You have to look at your own business.
Yeah, no, great points. And in terms of those businesses, and something that a question that was posed by a good friend and client, Jeff Respress, another marketing genius. If we are looking at the inevitable poor macroeconomic factors going forward, and once some of the government assistance is removed from the system, are there businesses that you think are going to be particularly, even the ones, in your world, that are going to be particularly resilient in the face of changing market conditions in a bear market?
Yeah, a good question. I don't want to speak as an economist. I'd have to frankly think it through a little bit, because there's going to be a cascading effect here. I believe in trickle up economics. So if none of these people get, the unemployment ends, they don't go back to work for whatever reason, right? We were talking earlier, like I know a lot of companies that have found efficiencies. Someone was just saying in the comments, like trim the fat, like that part, there is truth to it. And I mean true fat. Like for us, we aren't doing kombucha on tap and massages for everyone anymore. It was great while it was.
Come by the office.
Yeah, exactly. And our office, I miss our office, but we're not in it
Great
anymore.
office.
So like the amount of money we saved just not being in the office between team lunches and all these things that we were doing, that's the fat that you get trimmed. And so what I'm finding is sometimes that's people for some companies. We've done everything we can not to lay off people, but a lot of people have, and they're seeing like, I shouldn't bring everyone back. Like I only need half the people I had before. And so that part, like, I don't think that unemployment stays where it's at, but I don't think it goes back to where it was either. And so what that affects in terms of their lack of spending, and then that trickles into less profits for certain companies, that turns into what, that cascading effect of what that trickles to. But again, I'm kind of eternally optimistic. I don't think you're going to see companies just absolutely devastated. Carnival Cruise announced that, like, I think they're already sold out for August, or they're close to it. Like that this August, like that is crazy. But again, there was a ton of press around cruise ships getting this, but it turns out it's like number 50 on the list of causes of getting COVID in terms of environments that people got it in. It was like 3 cruises out of thousands that got contaminated. So
interesting.
Yeah, and again, that's just a sign of like people are spending money even at the Carnival level. And then my view of like the white collar, upper middle class, upper class, they're going to still have money. They're going to still spend money. So it depends on who you're targeting, but
yeah. Interesting quote that I read in a newsletter as I was doing a little research, that e-comm is still up market. Would you agree with that statement?
E-commerce is up market, meaning it touches
meaning that it's still generally reserved for more affluent individuals who are buying not necessarily luxury items, but more discretionary items that your 110% of your income spenders are not necessarily buying.
I would buy it because the whole direct to consumer being more efficient, and so you save money is BS. There's a marketing cost that replaces the idea of a retail cost. So like that the Everlane pitch isn't really true. And so I do believe that, because there is a cost to e-commerce. whether it's buying on Amazon, et cetera, there's a shipping cost that gets baked in, that people that don't have the means to spend $1 on shipping, and that they truly are looking at every dime they spend, are probably not spending the delivery charge, the shipping charge, et cetera, and running down to the store when they need something, and that's it.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
So two businesses we've got businesses that, are generally online, but, we may or may not have anticipated they were going to see boosts from this set of circumstances. Then we have some other businesses that have been forced online that really weren't online before. Say those two restaurants were online, but delivery was secondary, and now delivery is primary. So let's go to health, wellness, and fitness. Let's go to fitness. Fitness was forced to go online. It seems to have that shift, that pivot seems to have been healthier than people were anticipating. It also it may just be a manifestation of just the demand and the thirst and maybe the anxiety of the American consumer these days to stay in shape and stay healthy. But people didn't skip a beat. Everyone went straight to online fitness. And online fitness may have, through going virtual, may have even dragged in more users. If you want to elaborate on that.
Good friend. I told you about this, but a good friend of mine, Curtis Christopherson, owns a company in Canada called Innovative Fitness. They've got, I think, 25 gyms across the country, meaning Canada, and they've been around for like 20 years. And overnight, he was told, you got to shut everything down. And, I was talking to him. We're in a group of entrepreneurs that we were all talking about it. And within 3 days, he pivoted to virtual, and he's thrived because there were so many people that couldn't get to the gym, stay-at-home moms, et cetera, that love the brand, know about it, wanted to work out with his trainers. And they were already starting to develop some things that they just pulled the trigger and just went for it. And they're crushing it. They've become, the press on them is massive. They've found a way to pivot. And there are a few industries that can't do that, but I won't call them out. But one of my wife and my favorite restaurants didn't do delivery. And it was the first weekend of this, I think, we're like, we got to order that right now. We pulled it up and it didn't open. I was really kind of annoyed because, again, we both have mutual friends in the restaurant business that quickly pivoted to digital, online, had delivery or added delivery, takeout, et cetera. And they've done okay. They're not thriving, but they're keeping the lights on. And to see a company not do that, not take responsibility to do everything they can to keep their people working was a little disappointing. And then we got an email today that they're opening now for delivery. So it's a good day. But I think if you're, again, I don't want to put the airlines, that's rough. Cruises, travel, leisure, hotels, Airbnb, that's all very hard. But there is an opportunity for a lot of businesses to do something to make do with what's going on. Restaurants have a huge opportunity here. Literally, one of my childhood best friends is a sous chef at a Michelin restaurant in Brooklyn, and talked to him the weekend this all hit. He was very nervous, stressed out. Talked to him a week later. He's like, I think we're going to be okay. People were buying, and now it's 2 months later, they're okay.
Yeah. So. Yeah, the thirst of the American consumer, it's insatiable, and it's really fascinating to observe. In terms, obviously, online fitness is necessity is the mother of invention, and they've had to innovate very quickly. Restaurants, an interesting tactic that I saw, a restaurant in New York, this seemed to be the gold standard. Maybe there are a lot of people doing this and just hasn't caught my radar, but Carbone seemed to take a page out of my client Lawrence Longo's book. Lawrence, Off the Menu, uses the notion of really kind of eventish, off the menu, unique items as a marketing tool for restaurants. Carbone just decided to do that every fucking night. Yep. Another dish, another specialized dish every night. And so that is a way to just create an engaging experience out of something that would otherwise be pretty standard. Another space that we're seeing that in, we'll get to influencer marketing more generally in a second, but obviously, listen, brands are wondering, how do they content market? How's content marketing going to work now? We're doing it right now, and it's as cliched as it is, Buzz. Everyone's going live. Everyone's going live, creating chats, creating, talks, seminars, whatnot. Every brand in every vertical is trying to figure this out. And, you had some interesting observations on, one, the fatigue of that, and two, how smart companies are getting past that fatigue.
Yeah. It's the whole going virtual. I like the conversation going on in chat real quick too, so I want to call it out. someone said,
Sure.
I don't, restaurants profit 10%, and another person said 80% of restaurants are going to close their doors. Both, you got to be really careful with making broad statements like that. And by the way, I own a restaurant, so like telling me I don't know about it is an interesting statement too. What I'm saying is, first off, they run at 10% profit when they have full expenses, full revenue. Realize their entire wait staff is gone. A lot of their operating costs are down. So
Correct.
that came down about 50%. So if you can, and by the way, there are big publicly traded restaurants that are showing these numbers. So I'm not speaking off the cuff here. This is true. And so if you lose all your wait staff, which is a big part of your expenses, and you lose a lot of those operating costs that go in running a restaurant, you just have the kitchen staff and your rent and the food cost, you are actually able to stay afloat. Many, many restaurants are doing that. I'm not saying everyone. I'm just saying that there are a lot of restaurants that have found a way to do that and they are actually slightly profitable. They are not losing money because most of these restaurant owners don't have some big balance sheet to withstand this, but they're keeping afloat. So that is happening. The 80% number sounds pretty egregious too, from what I'm seeing. I don't know that 80% of restaurants are going to fail, but maybe.
No.
I don't believe that. But yeah, so to your point, with the whole virtual thing, like we threw a virtual conference, as we put it, April 7th. So like literally right when this hit, I'm a guy that's like on the road 2-3 weeks a month. I'm at a different conference all the time, et cetera. And all of a sudden, March 10th, everyone canceled everything through June. And I was supposed to be gone pretty much through June. And so I went to my team and said, hey, everyone's dealing with this. We might as well throw some like online marketing conference to give people what they were looking for. So we started looking at it, and then the quarantine hit and everything happened. And we went, all right, everyone's trying to just figure out what the hell is going on, as you've seen with BNN. So we pulled together a bunch of what we found are really smart and informed people and hosted a conference. Employees to 70K minimum salary in 2015, got super famous. We got Anthony Scaramucci, which was super controversial. That was fun. And basically hosted this thing. It was 10 hours of people. Like we had a Navy SEAL talk about how to manage in a crisis, like all these things. It was awesome and the most exhausting day of my life. And all I did was introduce each guest and interview a couple people. But I realized like the Zoom fatigue is a real thing. So it was super successful. Our biggest event, we do Hawke Fest every year. You were at the biggest one last year, it was about 600 people. This was 4,200 people. So we're like, wow, that was incredible. Cost nothing compared. So like, that's the other thing. The cost here, it was literally a 30th of the price. So that was really incredible. But I think the biggest thing that people are missing with all this stuff is engagement. People don't want to just stand and stare at their computer screen. Like this works, what we're doing right now, because it's a little more casual and you're on your phone and it's Instagram or whatever. But to do this for a full day, which is what people still are trying to do, or another webinar. I mean, every time I look at my email box, I'm like, there's 6 more webinar invites in there. And that worked when we weren't just doing that. But I think now people really need to find a way to engage the audience. Like, iHeart Media did that, or iHeart Radio, or whatever, did that, like, stay at home thing where they had a bunch of concerts. I could have watched that on YouTube, not in real time, and it would have been the same experience. So I don't have a solution. We're working on it because we're going to be hosting a week-long event in end of September, all virtual. But there's got to be some transition here where it's not just about staring at your screen, that there's things you do and there's engagement. Maybe it'll actually give rise to VR finally or something, but something's got to happen.
Yeah. I mean, okay, we're going to get into VR because I saw something piqued my interest. Obviously, another not groundbreaking observation, work from home, remote work, teleconferencing, whether or not it's going to be as widely adopted as some people are speculating on. I think people are probably out kicking their coverage a little bit on that right now, but it's happening. Okay. People like it. People want it to be available. It makes too much goddamn sense. Okay. Someone was kicking around the idea of this is going to accelerate virtual reality offices. You're going to be at home. You're going to be tapping into a virtual world that pretty much puts you in the same room as your coworkers. Yep. And seeing anything around that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so VR I think is still a little weird. Like AR, so there's 2 parts of that. The whole VR headset thing, it's so isolating, even if you're talking to people, like, and you're talking to someone that was like a total video game nerd and like competitive gamer in high school. So like, I have no problem staring at a screen for 15 hours, but VR, you're by yourself, you're closed off. And I just feel like there's an awkwardness, there's an uncomfortable. They've seen studies that show you can't do it for that long. So unless they find a way to soothe that, I think it's tough. And, you know, the whole work from home thing, someone talked about Twitter working from home. We went overnight, like literally not even overnight. We went into the office March 13th, Friday morning. And by like 10 a.m., I got a text that like they were going to declare a national emergency. And I went, I don't want to wait for that. Let's get ahead of it. And like, I just sent everyone home and said, we'll figure it out. And like, we didn't miss a beat. Like if you're a tech enabled company, you're already on Slack, you're already on Hangouts and Zoom. Like it's not hard to operate that way. So the going back to normal is going to be really interesting because I think there's going to be more Twitters. I don't think it's going to be the majority, but I think it could be a significant number of companies that just go, you know, that huge line on our P&L that's office space is completely unnecessary. Let's save that money, even put some of it back into our employees, and let's, you know, meet up once a month for way cheaper than paying for office space.
Yeah. If you put a gun to my head and told me what is the most significant, most impactful and interesting trend that we have to monitor going forward, this is it. This has ramifications across so many aspects of society, from down to migration patterns and where people, where you're living. If you don't have to live somewhere, Colorado, Texas, Nevada, they're all, the real estate agents there are all licking their goddamn chops. I'm telling you, because they think people are going to be leaving San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and a couple of the big towns to move there because they're not going to have to live there anymore. Like, why am I doing this? I'm going to go get 3 times the square footage somewhere else. So that's going to be absolutely fascinating to monitor.
So this actually happened. I grew up in Ojai. My mom's still up there. I went and socially distanced visited, and I don't remember why, but I pulled up Zillow, and it turns out like a massive house on a massive piece of property in Ojai in a gated community is the same price as my condo in Santa Monica. And it's an hour away. I'm not moving out of the state. And I was like, I mean, I could commute in once a week. Like if we're going to do remote, like I'll come in still, like it's an hour and a half. But yeah, I think it's a reality across the board, a potential reality.
Here's another piece of this. Let's be honest, because I've lived in LA for so long and even know some people who lived in LA before I was here, I talked to some friends who lived in LA in the 80s, and LA was not a sparsely populated place in the 80s and 90s. Right. It was well populated. They go, it was just easier to live here. The traffic, no matter how bad it was not nearly this bad. So let's say that a lot of the people, and here's another, not to be harsh, a lot of people who were young people who were forced to go by pure circumstance, went back to go live with their parents during this period back wherever they moved to LA from. A lot of them are not coming back. Agreed. A lot of them are not coming back to Los Angeles. They were not established enough. They had not made enough progress in their career for it to justify it. And LA some air may be let out of the bubble. So let's say things get a little, the traffic and commute and transportation gets a little easier in LA. Why the hell not live 45 minutes, an hour away? I mean, if some of these drives go from an hour 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, you know, and you don't have to be in the office, I mean, this is going to be massive.
Oh, I agree. And it needs to happen in some ways. Like the cost of real estate in LA, in San Francisco and New York, it's stupid. It doesn't make sense. And, you know, I actually thought that the change was going to come from driverless cars and, you know, my Tesla was going to drive me to work, and then screw it, I'll live in PV or I'll live up in Ojai or whatever. That's where I thought it was going to come from. But yeah, if being in the office every day culturally shifts and it's not an expectation, which I want to be careful with it though, because every other major event in history, people have thought the world will never be the same. And then 99% of the world is the same. You have undertones of things that change. 9/11, nobody would ever fly again. And yeah, we have TSA and we have Homeland Security, which are big things, but day-to-day life is pretty much the same. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's clearly some distinguishing factors to this. One, because it's that I just believe that a lot of society right now is kind of I got to come up with a better metaphor, but a weed growing in the wrong direction, right? Because it's growing out of an analog world that's no longer relevant. So if we're to remove some of that and let the weed grow back from its natural soil, which this has kind of allowed it to do, a lot of these remnants of life from the pre-digital age, just what the hell, why are we even going to have it anymore? Another deal that a pretty significant deal, Uber buying Grubhub. Interesting consolidation. Yet another deal that makes sense. A few people in we're all in these entrepreneur investor group chats and whatnot, and people are kicking around ideas nonstop all day long, right? Someone proposed that one about 3 weeks ago, and it ended up coming true. Any observations that you're seeing from that?
No, I think it's a smart move. It's a pretty typical, move going on right now, but why not consolidate that market? And, there's a few big players, Postmates, DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats. I don't know what the market share is. DoorDash seemed to really start to gain some headway, so it's probably Uber making, a jab at that. And Grubhub was really seamless, and Grubhub were the first movers in that before those guys. So I think it's a good move. It makes a lot of sense. And Uber, I saw one number, which is Uber's revenue. Uber Eats revenue was up 56% in April. So you got a booming business and you've got a competitor you can pick off, and you can come to a value that makes sense because it sounds like they negotiated pretty hard. Do it. Why not? That's not changing for a while. I think that's the other thing is I don't think people in mass are going to be sitting in a restaurant for a little while. So there's not going to be, people are getting really used to that. Like I've watched my parents, et cetera, like that never really used it, opening all these apps now and just doing it that way. So like that's the part that's really interesting. Another part that's interesting about this is the acceleration of adoption of technology for people that may have never adopted it or may have taken a few years. Like this accelerated things 3, 4, 5 years.
Without a doubt. Another thing, I think, let's spitballing here for a second. Obviously, as we discussed, anything that enhances the residential experience, that is a higher priority right now. It's going to continue to be a higher priority. Whether or not it's going to be mass adoption of remote work and teleconferencing, it's definitely going to go up a little bit, and a lot of more home delivery, food delivery. I mean, are there ways to enhance the home dining experience that people haven't really thought about yet?
And that goes back to, I'm really curious about how virtual engagement will continue to come into an industry, because we're hosting several dinners, including one tonight. Our team have been like co-hosting dinners with like 10 CEOs from all over the country to try to like just keep that going, because we used to do it in person and now we can't. So like at least I'm sitting having dinner with other people. I've been on a bunch of them. I'm sure you have too. And so that's the start of it, is just still allowing you to see other people and be around other people while sitting at home. I think, again, the enhancement, the opportunity is someone to figure out an engaging way to engage people when they're sitting by themselves, because there's a good chance that some remnants of this last for the next year plus. So let's not assume that it's all going back. And, the other industry that I think in Peloton being skyrocketing makes sense to me. I think home gyms and home workouts are going to continue to see a ton of success for a while, because gyms are like, going to the gym is already known to be dirty. Like that's already a thing people like recognize. And now it's really highlighted. So even when, the governor says the gym's back open, I'm sure there's a handful, a cohort of people that go back, but there's another cohort that don't. And that's a whole new market that opened up. For sure.
Real quick, Brody, Jenner, I know I've only got one fern right here. This may be an optical illusion. There could be two ferns, and I'm just doing some creative blocking, but you never really know. Okay, I think I want to get to one more topic related directly to the e-commerce and branding and marketing world, and then we're going to talk about a little situation in LA the last 24 hours. Yeah. I know this is Pinot Grigio, not rosé. I know how to segment my beverages between daytime and nighttime. You get me on a daytime BNN, we're going rosé all day. Also, next e-commerce fucking phenomenon, Rumors Rosé, best rosé, just destroys Whispering Angel. It's no competition. Okay, yeah. So we talked a little bit about influencer marketing, but not enough, because it's definitely an item that of heavy interest to my viewers and to people in the business world in general. So for a minute or two, you kind of saw, much like the drop in ad rates, you saw a drop in some of the pricing for influencer deals. I think there's also the question, where are those dollars going? Where's the market pricing going there? Where's the ROI metrics and judging the ROI? How is that necessarily evolving? And also, and here's an observation that a lot of people make. People kept on saying that at some point, everyone was going to get wiped out in the influencer world except for the A-list. That the middle and upper middle class of the influencers were going to, once the gold rush was over, yes, if you're 2-3 million followers and up, you're good. All brands are going to want to work with you. But 500,000 to 1 million, there's going to be enough of those people that there's not going to be much value, and there's going to be enough people in the 7 figures. You're not going to be as desired by brands. I don't know. What's your perspective on that? The upper middle class of the influencer world.
Yeah. So, assuming you've got 500,000 followers, let's say you reach, with a post 5,000 of your followers on any given post, there's value in reaching 5,000 people if you're a younger brand. The issue is if you're a P&G, yeah, you're probably not doing a deal with a 500,000 follower person. Like, it's just not there's no scalability in it. And that's the problem with influencer marketing in general, is every influencer is different. Every partnership's different. How they match up with your brand is different. So it's not like a rinse and repeat, like, oh, this person has 10 million followers, so everyone that has 10 million followers or anyone with this demo following is going to work. So, it's a very nuanced industry that you have to really see how, like, who the followers are, what they're engaged in, what the content is. And you also can't really look at it as just a straight performance channel that I'm going to spend $1,000 on an influencer and make 10 grand. You have to think of it as content, as just brand awareness, building trust, all these other things. But in terms of what we saw with this, like, it's funny because you mentioned the advertising side, like the Facebook and Google side. Again, the reason the prices dropped there were the big companies pulling out. On the influencer side, it's the Wild West, and I don't know that it'll ever be like systematized. It's just all over the place, that what we saw were a lot of people panicked, like, am I not going to get any income? And so prices for all these celebrities and influencers dropped drastically in the first few weeks, because they're like, I'll take anything just to make sure I have some money coming in. Sure. I don't care. I don't know what everyone's doing. Like, all this got canceled. My movie got canceled. My speaking engagement got canceled, whatever. We need something coming in. And so they went for it. And then I think we saw the reality hit of online, and people are consuming, again, 30% more content right now. That means 30% more people are seeing these same influencers and spending more time with them. There's a bigger value there, and they're spending money. So we've seen it kind of normalize, but I think there's still opportunity. It just depends. I mean, that's the whole thing about influencer marketing. That individual relationship with that individual influencer can drive something interesting.
Yeah, no, very super interesting. Emily Eichis, who's boots on the ground for a very up and coming wellness brand. I'd love to hear. She mentioned that micro influencers, counterintuitively, micro influencers are more important than ever. Emily, we only have limited time, but if you want to go throw any more analysis of that in the comment boxes, that would be fantastic. Erik and I are now going to shift a little bit away from a tried and true commerce, brand, and marketing issue to a little more of a societal issue. Man, I mean, the yesterday in Los Angeles, yesterday morning, just to set the table for everyone, because I put my own personal health at risk to keep you people informed. I gave blood yesterday morning. I went to the Red Cross downtown with my father. We gave blood. First time I ever gave blood. You're supposed to take it easy the day after you give blood, okay? Or for the day when you get blood. I gave blood. The minute I was waiting for my father, he did a different treatment that took longer. I'm a little woozy, and I see on my phone this LA Times article. Someone sends it to me. It's on Twitter. And it says that Los Angeles has extended stay-at-home orders for 2 more months, which makes no sense whatsoever. While every other state and every other city on earth is starting to gradually reopen, this seems to run contrary to every other a piece of information we've gotten from the city thus far. And I'm like, this makes no sense. Then I start reading the article, and it seems the quote from LA County Public Health Director Barbara Ferrer seems to suggest that it's like, yeah, we're gonna keep some stay-at-home orders in place, but we're gonna be gradually reopening in phases. And I'm like, holy shit, they did a fucking another clickbait masterpiece. Yep. Where they took some piece of a comment, formed the headline around that piece of the comment, and couched it in a way to create an impression of a far more grandiose story than there actually was. And this fucking thing gets spread everywhere. Okay. Oh, yeah. I've got multiple people. I've got people trying to close deals with investors. Oh my God, my investor's freaking out. Oh my God, this landlord's what are we gonna do with this landlord that we thought we were getting 1 month of deferral from? People don't seem to realize how significant the business ramifications are to some manipulated headline like that. Dave Ortiz, great job. Yes, fuck the LA Times paywall, because he knows anything the LA Times puts in front of the paywall, is clickbait, because they're just trying to juice the numbers to get more people to buy the subscription. Anyways, you and I are obviously very much aligned on this issue. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so many of my employees got scared. Our head of HR read the headline and was worried about, like, hey, what does this mean for us? This says that we're not going back till mid-July. And like, there were a few. First off, I was just infuriated because I definitely saw what that meant, because I saw that headline go viral immediately, and it was like, I've been keeping the daily briefs that Gavin Newsom's doing and Garcetti. I've been watching them, and Gavin Newsom had just talked about opening beaches and opening things up this week, and opening malls. So I was like, something's not right, because like there's no way that like Gavin and Garcetti get along way too well for Garcetti to be like, hell no, like there's not a war going on here.
Yes.
So that didn't
it's not
happen.
Cuomo de Blasio situation.
Right, exactly. And so I read into it and then saw the actual statement, and that's when it was irritating, because my own team was like a dozen or so people were like, what are we going to do? Like, what does this mean for us? What does this mean in general? And I had to like literally send a company-wide message out that's like, first off, it was fake news. And it's sad, but like, and this is the part that frustrates me, is like, I don't want to prove the critics right and have our news be unreliable. Like LA Times should be a credible, reliable source. But when they run things like this, the content of the article wasn't terrible. It was the headline, but they're jumping right into BuzzFeed clickbait, and
everyone reads the headline, and not
exactly.
just uneducated people, smart people. It's human instinct.
Yep.
I am going to post an article. This was from 2013. We're going to keep talking about this. I'm going to discuss this, and we're going to keep the live going. Okay. There was an article in 2013. It was written by, he's currently the tech writer for the New York Times. I think the quality of his work has plummeted, but he did good work. His name's Farhad Manjoo. In 2013, he wrote a piece called "You Will Not Read the Rest of This Article." Okay. It's great. It's literally showing it's during the first phase of online media.
Yeah.
The media recognizing people don't read the fucking article. They stop. You can literally create, maybe not entirely linearly, it's somewhat exponential. If you're trying to chart the eyeballs and the stickiness of the eyeballs as you continue to go down the piece, you keep on losing people and losing eyeballs, go down the piece.
Yep.
Guys, we're 15 years into online media, maybe 17 years. Okay. These media companies know what they're doing. They craft the headlines specifically to juice the shares. And that's what happened here. And it had some true, tried and true, actual fucking, real world impact. We got this one's ending in 3 minutes. We might as well just get started back up here right now and continue discussing this.
Yeah.
So tap out. I'll save this and then restart the live. Everyone, we're going to keep going.
Okay.
Oh, Dory, you have been, you have been a top performer. Come on, there we go. Okay, guys, Dory Benami has been the lingerie industry of the BNN comment section, much like the lingerie industry. Sorry, I'm just giving a little tribute to Dory Benami. Brianna Hess, who did so much to help me out with my production value and whatnot. Anyways, Dory Benami is the lingerie industry of the BNN content section. He's outperformed any expectations. He's done a great job. Anyways, okay, so someone who's not outperformed expectations, the LA Times here. And it's just, here's the thing, and here's what we see with clickbait and with manufactured, manipulated headlines, is that they're not dumb, because they know how to find plausible deniability. They know how to craft a headline that has enough truth in it to say, well, look, it's locked, stay at home. Technically, these are stay-at-home rules.
Right.
So they clearly are extending some of those rules for a couple more months. So our headline technically was true.
Yep.
Come on, guys. You knew what impact that headline was going to have. You knew.
Well, so that's the part that I think is actually interesting, though. I don't know, and I don't know the journalist. I didn't research her enough, but I wonder if they knew the impact that would have, because I don't think it's as predictable. I think that they knew that it would get attention, but I think that I like to give the benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't know that they actually knew. I think it's a good lesson, and I think there's a whole other conversation about, like, media needs to be kept accountable, because the amount of false information that came out through this has probably been the worst part of all of it. The amount of fear that came out of false information over and over again is crazy.
Insane. Okay, so in terms of plausible deniability and whether or not they understood that it was going to have this, here's the thing. They clearly, I don't think, I mean, people, I'm telling you, people don't know how impactful yesterday's headline is. Because as I've kind of become a bit of a source for debunking or analyzing some stories that come out, I have people come to me a lot, whatever, I'm sorry, it's just the truth. The amount of people who messaged me yesterday about this story and who also messaged me noting how many people were sending the story to them was insane. Yeah. Beyond any other story that has been released in the past 6 weeks since that initial first week or two of the lockdown news, this shatters the impact of every story since then. Okay.
Agreed. Yeah.
I've researched this writer. She's done nothing notable. I'm sure she's a very nice person, and we'll get into whether or not she probably was doing this at the behest of her editors. But did she think it was going to hit this hard? That it was going to slap this hard? No, she didn't.
Exactly.
But it doesn't matter. But they still, the fact that it had this.
It's still dishonest. Yeah, it's straight dishonest. Yeah, it's and that is the issue. Is I don't know whether it was digital. It really is digital media that created this. But obviously, I hate to say it, but Trump's the one that called it out, and he's right. And that's love him or hate him. This part, he's right. I love flipping between CNN and Fox and MSNBC and looking at the LA Times and New York Times. The amount of stuff that's published on a daily basis that's just wrong, and then they go, oh, never mind. Like, they don't even retract it, by the way. They don't correct themselves. LA Times didn't retract that headline. They just changed it on their website, by the way. That's the best part. You go to the link.
That's one of their tactics.
Yeah.
That's one of their tactics. And listen, another guy, love him or hate him, that is clearly extremely insightful on this. Mike Cernovich, who I interviewed on Saturday night. I like the guy a lot. He said some controversial stuff. I support anyways. But he knows he knows these tactics better than anyone. He's studied them. He's a fucking PhD in this. And this is what he says. He said, they never print, they never do a retreat. They just move on. They just go to the next story, right? Because once they get the clicks, they don't care. They already got the clicks. That story's out into the environment in the marketplace, gathering the clicks and juicing the numbers. Yeah. No, it's sorry.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out for a sec, but or I don't know if I did or you did.
No, no problem. So anyways, so once the story's out in the open, they don't retract it. They never retract it, and that they didn't do it here.
Which, by the way, from a capitalist standpoint, is the right move. If they apologize, it turns into a bigger story, and all of their competitors, hang them out to dry. That's how that turns out.
They know what they're doing. They're not dumb.
Exactly.
This is their business. They do. This is what they do. And I don't, from a pure capitalist perspective, I don't blame them. But but here's the point, and the point that you and I are discussing.
Yeah.
If you're looking at this from a pure, not immoral, but amoral perspective, look what happens. Look at the impacts. Do you know how many people have come to me literally saying the news is giving me an anxiety disorder? Yep. I'm sorry to break it to you guys. The news and information, particularly in this environment, is not. It has a moral and an ethical feature to it because it's impacting people's mental state, mental condition, and even from there that starts impacting business, as I think you saw yesterday.
Yeah, and yesterday I heard investors holding off on investing, customers holding off on signing, employees having anxiety attacks. Like, it was real damage that was done by that one headline. And I think, again, there needs to be some level of accountability around that. And there was that show on HBO, I think it was called Newsroom, the Sorkin show. And they said it on there, like, the problem was news was supposed to be a public service that was funded by the government, and then it became ad revenue. And when ad revenue stepped into news, which is a long time ago, and then you had CNN come out with the first 24-hour news, so they needed news cycles and they needed to keep it going, and like all these incentives are misaligned with what the value that they're supposed to be bringing, which is actually informing people. So another opportunity out of all this, figure out how to create a truthful news source that's not C-SPAN or NPR, that has a model that can actually make sense, but that you don't have to do clickbait, you don't have to do these things to drive revenue. And maybe whether it's a nonprofit or something, someone has to do something about that.
Yeah. Hey, you and I have kicked around the idea. Hey, I'm sure BNN has
exactly
somewhere. But I think a piece of it is plain and simple black and white supply and demand, because I'll give a shout out to some of my local television news reporter friends. They don't like when I really go after the news and the media in general very hard, but they understand because they don't take that approach. And I've said this before, local television media is actually very good because they have limited shelf space. They don't, their main distribution platform is not an online periodical, so they're not all about the clicks on the website, and they have limited broadcast time each day. So they're not broadcasting 24 hours. They're only broadcasting 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. All of a sudden, it's kind of shocking how good you get when you have limited shelf space. And so I think to find a way to translate that to the web, I think is the solution here. And I mean, that's only directional, but we'll see.
Yeah, like KTLA is great. Spectrum News, I've really enjoyed. The problem there is they haven't figured out their digital model the same way. And when they do, it might be clickbait. And that's part of the issue is like, if it is ad revenue, they need clicks. That's how this works. And that goes to the responsive advertiser too. Like don't buy on these sites is part of the job too. Supporting fake news is an issue as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And listen, this is a problem that, and what I was trying to explain last night with a post of mine is that, and I don't want to sound like I'm making such grand accusations against the media, because this is another aspect that is incidental to their business, is we become weaponized. The citizen who's trying, because what they're firing this bullet's the wrong, it's a virus, okay? They spread this virus, they put this out into the environment, it's their business model to get us to spread it for them. So if they're giving us something that's corrosive, something that's harmful, and we're spreading it, we're spreading the harm, okay? That's why, yes, Dory, you're true. I did scoop
exactly. You got the scoop.
But I won't even get into the details of why certain calls were made to the mayor of Los Angeles to clarify this because of me, but that's another conversation for another time. Anyways, so we are weaponized. It's just a fact of life, okay? If you are receiving information and then distributing to others, you might as well be playing journalists, okay? This is how it works in this environment. So unfortunately, if people want to be responsible and do right by their friends, do right by themselves, they've got to be more vigilant in reading the news and being critical and exercising their critical thinking abilities.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some individual responsibility. We've all seen it. The amount of like random, I saw someone share like, it was like Trump 2020 xyz.tumblr.com / blah, blah, blah. And then it was some headline. And it's like, you think this is a credible source? Like a Tumblr page. And it was like I've seen a lot of posts from, I think it's the Washington Times or it's not the Washington Post, but it's like the Washington Times. And it's all fake news. Like it's these clickbait sites that people still have. I don't know how the masses haven't figured out that this is all bullshit. And by the way, the problem is the core media isn't any better, but like you definitely don't trust some random blog chain.
Yeah. Well, I think a big mindfuck is that everyone keeps on asking me, Matt, what do you believe is a good news source? And I can't necessarily say that, because the same source can be pretty good and disgustingly bad within the same 24 hours, right? Like I do not like CNN. There's things CNN does that's absolutely, yes, Emily, we know that's your college thesis. You can expand on your college thesis.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yes, under her pseudonym, and Emily White, good old nom de guerre. Anyways, the CNN, but you know something, and I posted about it today in regards to Chris Cuomo interviewing the construction site owner of the property that Ahmaud Arbery was videoed at. That was good journalism. That was, listen, there's rumor and innuendo. We're not getting the true story, or with the local authorities in Georgia are not being forthcoming. So I'm going straight to the source. We found this individual who's involved, who is the only person who has certain information. He has his lawyer, and I'm going to conduct an interview, and I'm just going to get the fucking facts, no agenda. And he did an amazing job. I was like, this is how journalism is supposed to be. But then literally 20 minutes later on CNN, you see the most ridiculous clickbait chyrons. And so how do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah, and again, it's got to be, you have to have a news source that's not incentivized by ulterior motives. Like, the problem is there's an argument on both sides between the shutting down the economy and opening it up in terms of Trump the election. And CNN's funded by Democrats, and they want to make sure that we shut down as long as possible so that he can't win, and vice versa. They're opening it up too early. And there's probably some truth to both sides of that argument.
Absolutely.
So you have to get, again, an unbiased news source that isn't playing to an audience, playing to a funder, playing to an advertiser. You have to get, and I don't have the answer to that, because if I had a good idea, I'd love to create it. But again, we can plug BNN, but the truth is it has to be a business model that can make sense, that can attract people, that can actually make money, because it costs money to do this stuff. You need to be able to pay journalists. You need to be able to do your research. You need to broadcast. Like, this isn't something that, frankly, someone can do on Instagram. It's got to be more prolific than that. And I'm hoping that I'm encouraging someone in the audience to jump up and do something here, because I think you want to talk about some massive shift in a positive way. Find a way to disseminate information quickly. And Twitter actually is partially good for this in a weird way. Like, whether it was Arab Spring or even the LA fires, great example, or the Santa Barbara fires are more what hit home, because like they almost took out my mom's house and my childhood home. And like, you couldn't look anywhere to find out even where the fire was or what was happening. The best place to figure out real-time news during like our true crisis, like when things are happening quickly, has been Twitter recently. And so finding something like that, someone that can disseminate that, those kind of things.
But that's such a difficult road to hoe, and in fact impossible, because your Twitter feed is only as good as your curation abilities. And listen, This is going to the reason that I've become a good source for news, I'm just going to tell you guys, it's because I have the most well-honed Twitter feed there is. I follow the best people. I follow the smartest people, the best composition of people possible. I get all the good information from smart. The people that I follow on Twitter blow the people on cable news away. Okay, I've found and that's the only reason. If I hadn't honed it with that much discipline and with that much specificity and quality, and even for being able to, through an entire funny, maybe not 360 degrees, but 320 degrees. Okay, I would not have access to the quality or be able to process the quality information that I do.
Yeah.
If someone isn't doing it the way that I'm doing it, you're in trouble. I'm not kidding. If you're just following the normal corporate media, you're not going to get good information.
Well, and so here's the challenge, though. You spent a lot of time curating, people that you find trustworthy, that are speaking in facts, and you have an eye for that. How do we disseminate that into the masses? How do you get those people? And that's where there's a big solution. It's like, great, there are people all over that are actually gathering true facts, being responsible with what they share. How do we highlight those people so that they rise to the top? So that's who people listen to. And there's no bias. There's no, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. It's facts.
Okay, but here's the thing. There's always going to be some bias. The challenge is to find a full enough set of perspectives that are not two-dimensional, not the right and the left, but do the entire fucking circle. Okay. Yep. And that includes, that's why, the people that, a lot of the more intellectual Trumpists and national intellectuals and the Bernie people I follow have way more in common than Fox News and MSN. They're like not that far away, right?
Yep,
so
I agree.
It just shows you how three-dimensional this is. And one thing that I did that I was kicking around is, something, one of the kind of series of talks that I need to have is just getting random assortments of the really smart people that I follow on Twitter that have nothing to do with each other, and get them to hop on and have conversations. So it could be something that the environment is that fragmented. That might just be an improvement. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
This is something that got talked about in the last election. The fact that we're all getting our information from different places. Like, I'm just going to say this to make this an easier conversation. I grew up in Ojai. I'm as liberal as it gets in terms of how I was raised, but I've had to coach my friends on that. We see it in LA all the time. Anyone that supports Trump's evil, they're, racist and bigots and da-da-da. And it's like, you got to understand that, like, that is not why most people voted for Trump. And there was something there. And it's also, they were seeing information you're not seeing. They were seeing, like, we roll our eyes at, like, oh, Hillary's emails. And it's like, yeah, but they were being told by their media sources and the people they trust that that is a really big fucking deal. And she's a traitor and treasonous, and it'd be crazy to vote for her. And that's the only source of information they have. So they're like, oh, okay, yeah. Just like we're hearing that Trump told people to inject themselves with Lysol, which is not what he said at all, just to be clear, when you look at the actual quote. And, again, I'm not a huge fan of the guy, but like, you got to give credit where credit's due and actually focus on stuff that's a problem. He said that can't we inject people with a disinfectant? What he meant was an antiviral. He used the wrong word, which is a stupid thing to say. And then the dumbest part was he didn't just say, sorry, wrong word. He said I was being sarcastic, which isn't what he was being. He just used the wrong word. But then instead of quote showing that, saying he just meant an antiviral, it's like, he's telling us to inject Clorox. If anyone actually saw that and then went and injected themselves with Clorox, there's something called Darwinism that kicks into effect. Like, that is not what he said, not what he meant. And whoever heard it that way, good luck.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept of don't think about a pink elephant?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. So the quickest way to get people to think of a pink elephant is step into a room, say, don't think of a pink elephant. Everybody's going to think of a pink elephant. Okay. With the media amplifying the notion that he said this, that's what leads people to do it, right? If they just ignored it, how many people were going to hear that Donald Trump kind of sloppily, as he very often does, sloppily misstate something? Everyone would have ignored it. Maybe one guy would have fucking, would have drank some stupid shit. But it became a thing because the media kept talking about it. And I know a couple of my journalist friends are going to say, well, we have to discuss it. It's newsworthy, blah, 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 blah. I mean, not really. It's not really newsworthy. He didn't say it.
Well, again, if you're talking about, especially in a time like now where people really need real-time information on what's going on so that they can act accordingly and adjust, spending a 3-day news cycle on what the president said or didn't say about injecting Clorox was ridiculous. And again, this has highlighted the sort of gaps in our media heavily. Like, if anything, for me at least, that it's highlighted our, frankly, gap in preparedness on the hospital side and the medical side, and our gap in media and information. Disseminating information in the US is terrible. Other countries aren't having these problems that we are. Other countries aren't having people protest lockdowns and fight for it because they're hearing different messages from different sides of the aisle. Like, that's not a thing in most of the world. And it's a problem in the United States. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, I can start drilling into that one and think about, the problems and the rotting core of the American soul right now and how that splays out into so many aspects of society. But yeah, I think yesterday was a masterclass. Yesterday was a fucking masterclass on the impact of fake news and how that fake news is not always people outright lying. It's not fabrications. It's not hoaxes. It is subtle linguistic manipulation of stuff that may have some plausible deniability, but that has an impact that communicates something that's not true. If you are fake news, if you're communicating something that is not, and that's what I was trying to break this down for people who are like, why is this fake news? Clearly, what was said, and the truth was, we are extending some protective orders, which could be anything. Could just be
and by the way, and no one's surprised about that. That's not a headline. Like, by the way, some level of stay at home is going to keep going through July. Like, no shit. Like, everybody paying attention knows that we're not going to like just be back in the restaurants and back in, someone mentioned 14, like partying in a club or something. I don't think 14's open, but partying in clubs again. Like, no, that's not going to happen until July, at least. That makes sense. And that's what the actual statement.
Sure.
That wouldn't have been a headline. That's not even an article.
The impression was, and what came through, and what clearly the headline was crafted to communicate, was that whatever the order was that's currently in place, the current guidelines were going to be extended for at least 2 more months. That everyone's like, oh my God, I thought we were finally coming to the end of this phase, which we are. That's true. We're coming to the end of this phase. And everyone thought it got extended through July. Okay. Right. And the fucking writer can play Babe in the Woods. Okay. They can try to claim plausible deniability. It's fucking bullshit. And here's another problem. Yes, her editor probably is the one who okayed that headline or even crafted the headline. But this is something that is used to excuse fake news often. And another thing that my very honest journalist friends who are well-meaning but like to definitely are protective of fellow journalists, like to say, well, fuck, sometimes it's our editors. I'm sorry, you cannot keep on just chalking it up to that excuse. You can't keep on using that excuse, because if you keep on using that excuse, the problem never gets solved. If we never can criticize a journalist for the headline attached to their story because an editor probably came up with it, how do you ever hold anyone accountable?
Yeah, and that's, I think, and I do believe in, like, we have to protect the freedom of speech and our First Amendment, right? Like, totally. But we have to find a balance here. Like, there was a great statement. I can't remember who the quote was for. I like to give credit, but it was the idea that, censorship and the idea of censorship was very different before this age of information. Censorship is now being violated not by censoring something, but by flooding misinformation. And that's the new censorship, is flooding misinformation. And
Absolutely.
so there has to be a battle, just like we battle censorship, we have to battle in misinformation. And it's a delicate situation, but after Mark Zuckerberg testifying that he'll never shut down fake news, they seem throughout this to finally go, oh shit, look what we've created here. And now they have the little fake news monitor that's happening on Facebook. Like, we might see some solutions starting to come up that will hurt the companies that have done this. But yeah, something needs to be done. It's not an easy solution. It's like similar to the Second Amendment argument. Like, there's two sides to this. They don't know how to talk to each other, and so it's really hard. It's like a lot of other situations, but there's got to be a middle ground on all these things that allows for protecting people.
Yeah, and I think as I was talking about, and why I'm very enamored with my Twitter feed, because it's 8 sides. We need to stop thinking in terms of two sides.
That's fair. Just
because that's where the vote is binary, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, we are voting on a binary framework, but the conversations and the ideas are coming from 7 different angles. And for instance, to the extent that I do relate a little bit to the more conservative side, and this was one of the best, I will post about this. If you want to get fucking smart, you're going to listen to a podcast from Eric Weinstein with Ross Douthat. Okay, Eric Weinstein's the best in the business right now. He has the most interesting podcast there is. It's highbrow Joe Rogan-esque. Okay, and he had on Ross Douthat, who's even his liberal counterparts will acknowledge him as the best current semi-mainstream political columnist. And they had and what Ross was saying was like, listen, one of the positive impacts of Trump is because he split the right, into that. Now you have interesting conversations on the right because there are people on the right fighting each other. Yep. Okay, the nationalists versus the traditional kind of free market, semi-libertarian conservatives. So those conversations start to become interesting. If it's everyone on one side having the same conversation about everybody else on the other side, that's not interesting. That's not interesting. So I think the more sides you add to the conversation, the more sides you acknowledge, that's how you get stuff done.
I agree, except for the problem in politics is a lot of times you have 2 cogent arguments and they're deciding between the 2. It's a whole stealing that's why it's a 2-party system. Because if there's, for example, 2 good Democrats, 1 good Republican, that Republican wins by just getting 35% of the vote if they split the majority. So you end up in an interesting situation when you have these disparate parts, that's where our political system, a whole nother conversation, needs a lot of fixing, because that has been the issue. That was why Mike Bloomberg avoided the last election. He didn't want to split the party. Happened anyways, but that's a consequence of that.
For sure. So listen, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, there's no way that this is, we just go to one source. What are some of the sources that you go to for addressing news?
I mean, I honestly go to everything. The moment something catches my eye, and I'm also being wary, like you mentioned this earlier, the news in general is like, we don't need a 24-hour news cycle. So like, you can usually check it maybe in the morning, maybe at night, and that's it. And if anything seems off, I just go double check it with other sources.
You have to. Yeah. Every story you have to check multiple sources.
Yeah. Anything I'm taking to heart and acting on, most of it is just information. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting, cool, like that's fine. I'm trying to stay informed in that way. I mentioned Uber's April revenues, Uber Eats April revenues up 56%. I got that from CNBC. I didn't double check it. CNBC, I actually like watching. I actually own, I think I own one public stock, and I have like $100 in the public market. Like, it's not my thing.
I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is not where I need to focus.
But that's why I like watching CNBC, is because they don't care about the politics of it. That, like, that part of it, they're not reporting on. And what's interesting is watching their bias. So they have, like, Carl Icahn came on in late March and said the entire economy is fucked. It's going down to 10,000. This is going to be it. They're talking to a guy that's known to short everyone. And he's talking about how the economy is going to collapse. Like, of course he is. He wants everyone to panic and sell. That's what he's banking on. And so, and Trump actually tweeted this today. It was on CNBC, is why I know that he said, be very careful listening to rich guys and what they think of the market, because they're either betting on it growing or betting on it shrinking. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's true. Like, the biases on CNBC, the guys that they're interviewing, they're saying what they want people to believe. They're not saying what they actually believe. Whether, if they're saying, hey, I'm being really cautious with the market, guaranteed they have shorts. If they're saying, hey, I'm really bullish, I think we're ready to go, we hit the bottom, guaranteed they have a lot of money in the market right now. So you've just got to, again, take everything with a grain of salt and know where it's coming from.
Without a doubt. Erik, I think we're coming up on an hour and a half. I think we did justice to the e-commerce world, the consumer space, the economy in general, to fake news, the search for truth, the how people need to approach being. We're all journalists right now, guys. We're all nodes in the network. Okay, we're all switchboards operators, and we've got to accept that responsibility. Listen, I'm trying to judge. I'm nobody's dad, but we need everyone to understand that when you feed information to others, you're a journalist in and of yourself. Brody Jenner obviously has great taste in parties. He knows that my birthday party is the best fucking party of the year. It's just, it's one piece that cannot even be denied of real news. It was the best night. I don't remember much of it, but it was great.
As you shouldn't.
Erik, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
With you on a variety of topics. During the situation so far. Tonight was, I've already got people texting me about how informative this is. I can't wait for all people in the business community to check it out and get the insight that a lot of people are speculating on, but we were able to dig a little bit deeper tonight. So thank you once again for your time. This was great, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everyone watching. Appreciate all the comments.
Awesome, guys.
Right.
Erik,
have a good night.
Take care, brother. Bye. Thank you, guys. Yeah, tonight that was great. Dude, guys, Ben Bacall, love you, buddy, but I can't send you who I follow. Just go to my Twitter account and go see who I follow. Because I'm telling you, I follow the smartest people. Anyone who wants to get smart, Cerno was pretty good. That was great too, but Cerno was great. Anyone who wants to get smart, you will go to my Twitter feed, you will go see who I follow, and you will start following, check them all out, and you will start following those people. That's how you get fucking smart. I follow the best people. Ben, you were great. Everyone with Giles, always a top performer. Dori Benami, Dori Benami, the lingerie industry of the comments section. Emily, you came at it from a lot of interesting angles tonight. Ben, if we got Charles Munger on BNN, that would freaking blow my mind into a million pieces. All right, well, let's throw it out there right now. Ben Bacall, one of the top brokers in LA, just an animal, just a guy with a unique set of skills in getting real estate deals done, one of the best in the business. Ben Bacall thinks that we can get Charlie Munger, one of America's greatest thinkers, on BNN. It would be epic. Let's see if he can come through. Love it, guys. Okay, everybody, this was fun tonight. Thank you to Erik. Love that. I'll see you guys next time.